I grew up in a small town in Virginia in a Christian home. My father was actually a pastor, so I was drugged to church my entire life. But when I was probably around the age of 10 years old, my parents divorced, and it was a very public and open divorce. When everything was good, everybody was on our side. But when my father lost his church and things fell apart in our family, then I felt like people totally abandoned us and treated us completely different than the way that they did before. I remember as a young girl, I would lay in my bed at night and pray, Lord, put my family back together. And when I didn't see that happen, I became very angry and very bitter. And I made a determination in my heart, I'm going to destroy my life and I'm going to make everybody pay for the things I've had to go through. I went to school looking for the kids that I knew were doing drugs, into alcohol, and told them this is something that I want to get involved in. And so when I was 12 years old, a girlfriend of mine and I, we snuck out of the house, met up with some guys. They had some pain pills, and we crushed them up and snorted them, and that was my first experience with drugs. And it was a very, very quick process for me. By the time I was 13, I had taken cocaine, acid, marijuana, basically anything that I could get my hands on that would take away the pain that I was dealing with on the inside. I remember one night, my brother invited me to go to church with him. And I had a lady come up to me after the service, a total stranger, who said to me, young lady, the Lord told me to tell you that that service was for you. And she wrote down her phone number and said, if you ever need me, you give me a call. And I remember we left the service that day. We went to eat at a restaurant. And again, another stranger walks up to the table. And she said, you know, I want you to know God has a plan for your lives. And she looked at me and said, He has a special plan for your life. And so I remember leaving the restaurant that day, and I sat in my car, and for the first time in my life, I felt hope, but I did not know how to overcome this physical addiction. And so eventually I had to be admitted into the hospital, and the doctors did tests on me and took my parents in a room and said of the stages of addiction that I was at the last stage before death and to prepare for my funeral. That was my rock bottom moment. I knew that if I did not make a decision to change, that I was going to end up dead very quickly. And so I remembered this lady that had given me her phone number from the church. She came into the hospital and began to speak to me and minister to me. And God used her to say things to me that there's no way that she could have ever known about them. And that was my breaking point. I remember I started crying, and I had been so hard for so many years, but God began to minister to this broken and hurting little girl. And at that point, she looked at me and she said, Amy, are you ready to surrender your life to Christ? And so I cried out to the Lord that night, Jesus, you're real, and you change me, or I'm going to end up dead. And in that moment, the gospel became real to me. Jesus broke every one of the addictions off of my life and did such a work of transformation in my heart that I knew I could not contain it. It really gave me a passion to go to the prostitutes, to go to the gang members, the drug addicts, and let them know that there was a future and a hope for them. To be able to look at them and say, you know what, I've walked where you've walked, and I know what it's like to be on the other side. And to be able to get up and proclaim to them the freedom that's found in Christ, it's absolutely incredible. My name is Amy Lambert, and I've been ransomed.